Hey folks, so we had a break from gaming. You can check out Ryan talk about that up here. Bing! But today I want to talk about kind of adding elements into your game, but fitting them in so that they make sense. This last session that we ran, I had not only some weather that kind of made sense, we were in a marsh, and it was somewhat magically fueled by the ritual being disrupted. But once they got down into the prison they were heading into, I had a puzzle in there. There was different doorways, north, south, east, west, and a different element would appear in this bowl in the center that clued in which direction they were supposed to go. Now, my players managed to find the kind of cheat sheet that one of the guards had written down and like shoved in the back of a drawer. So they got a little bit of an advantage figuring it out. I knew I wanted to have a puzzle in this session because that's something the players enjoy, and it adds a nice fun element that is not just like, hack slash, but it's like, okay, let's figure this out. And there was a combat element to that puzzle. If they went the wrong direction, an elemental appeared. But I wanted the puzzle to make sense. Because I've seen some examples of puzzles that I'm like, that's really cool. Why would that be in a dungeon? Why would that be in a castle? Why? Unless you have like a trickster or just kind of mad, crazy magician, it wouldn't make sense. So that was the thing that I was looking for. Why would this be here? And my rationale was that, okay, they want some kind of security system that you can't just walk in and walk into the prison or walk out of the prison. You have to know the order that you have to go through. And if you get it wrong, there is a consequence. You're going to be fighting a fire elemental or an earth elemental. And most non-adventurers are just going to get smushed. That will help deter folks from just kind of wandering in. And I found this, I can't remember where I found this. I did find this basic idea discussed on a forum. Yay, whenever I need puzzles, I type in like D&D puzzles and go and look on forums and see what other folks have suggested, because I'm not great with coming up with puzzles. That is something I need to work on. And if you have suggestions of figuring out puzzles for your players to play, tell me in the comments below. But getting back to the kind of topic of the video, that was something that the players actually, a couple people commented on, that it made sense. It was fun, it was challenging. Because they had the key, it gave them an advantage, but they still had to figure out what the symbols meant. And they actually, originally, they went through the first door and went the wrong direction. They mixed up the symbols and went through the earth elemental symbol when they should have been going through the fire elemental symbol, and so they ended up having to fight a fire elemental. And they once they got through that, they were like, okay, I think I figured out. Sorry about the motorcycle that just went by. So yeah, they figured out kind of about like, okay, I think this is what we need to do. They went through the right door for the fire elemental, and the room went dark, and they turned on the light and saw that there was earth in that bowl, so that gave them the hint of, you need to go through the earth door. And they had pieced together what door that was. But actually, as they were discussing it, they had flipped the water and the air, and I was kind of like, ooh, yay, haha, I'll get to do something again. But then in their rushing through, they actually did go through the right door for the air and for water. So they figured it out. It would have been probably much harder had they not found that key. But I wanted to have that key there because I didn't want it to just be how the hell are we supposed to figure this out? They found it because one of them got a natural 20 on their investigation check when they were checking out the office area, the warden's office of the prison. If they hadn't gotten that natural 20, or if they hadn't rolled really, really high, they wouldn't have found it. Unless they were purposefully looking for something like that. Because I wanted to make sure that it was if they got down there and got just like, I cannot figure this out, there was a way for them to kind of go back up, leave the room, that they weren't just stuck there. to backtrack and try and figure out, hey, are there any clues? Did we miss something? And that's something that I appreciate with puzzles and stuff like that, is that there is a clue or something, whether that's given to the players right away when they walk in and something announces, this is the key to figuring out this, here's the hint for the puzzle. Or if it's something that, if they do really well investigating beforehand, they find it, or that they can go back and double check and find out, oh hey, yeah, on the bottom of this thing, it's got a little riddle on here that clues us into the way to get past this room. I had thought through this prison of why would it be here, how was it made, so that it made sense. And then further into the session, there were a number of elements, elements that made it kind of a maze, that they had to overcome or figure out how to get past. That all of those were why I thought through, why are they here? Not just, I want them to have an encounter, so we'll put an encounter here. But hey, okay, they enter to a chamber, and one of the doors leads off to, I don't know, they don't know. They didn't go there. I had a basic idea for where it led, but I knew that they had a compass pointing towards the person they needed to rescue, and that compass was pointing into the door with the skull, not the door with the face. But I knew what was behind that door. I had all of that figured out. The other door, I had a basic idea. If they happened to go look, I could kind of improvise from that basic idea. But I had these suits of armor standing in front of it, and if events leading up to them getting to this prison had gone differently, they might have actually had a way to get past these guards without fighting it. They cast Identify, they detect magic to try and figure out what was going on. If there was a way past through the door without having these animated suits of armor attack them, they came up with kind of a cool, they were like, oh, we need a key that has something to do with this door. Well, the door had a skull on it, so one of the players ran back and grabbed, there were some skeletons around, and grabbed a skull from the skeleton and tried walking through the door that way. Well, that didn't work, and the suit of armor attacked them as soon as the door opened. But it was fun, and I wish there had been a way for me to actually, reward that, but it just it wouldn't have made sense with the reasoning of why it had been made. So, in that sense, I guess, coming up with all of that reasoning and logic maybe hindered in that specific moment, because I didn't want to change it to reward this great thinking by the player, because it just wouldn't have made sense for what the place they were in was for. Now, there are probably some other puzzles and stuff like that a similar situation, I could go, yeah, okay, we'll throw this solution out the window and go with the solution the players came up with. And I think that's important often with puzzles. A couple of times that I've introduced challenges or puzzles into the game, I've had a couple of ideas for how they could solve it, but also been like, I don't know, we'll see what my players come up with. If they come up with something that I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, go with it. I like having puzzles that either have a clear answer, and not necessarily riddles. I think riddles sometimes get... I'm not a fan of a lot of riddles, because they're either, the players figure it out right away, and it's like, okay, alright, well, I put all that work in it, and they figure it out in 5 seconds. Or you end up sitting there, people get frustrated and all of that. If you enjoy riddles, go for it. Yay, awesome. It's not really my cup of tea. So yeah, I think it's good to have puzzles that make sense. Why was the puzzle there? Who created it? Why did they create it? Why would it be here versus just having a locked door? And then I think also it's great to either have a puzzle that has a clear solution and find ways to drop hints to that solution, either leading up to the puzzle or as something that the players could backtrack or do some more investigating and find those hints. You don't have the players getting frustrated because their characters don't have enough information to solve this. Or having a puzzle that might have a couple of different options for solutions, but is a little open-ended, that you know how the mechanics work. So if they find a way to override the puzzle, the mechanic, you know, if it's a like, oh, well, they should be going through and doing this very careful dexterity, but you have somebody who just brute forces through it and they roll high enough, or they come up with a creative solution to get past it, to reward that creativity. That was a big part of this last session, was a couple of those little puzzles and stuff like that. The maze that they went through, basically, I didn't have any of it plotted out. I just used an idea I'd seen discussed online of having certain things I knew they would run into. I knew they would run into these kinds of traps. They would have to pass a couple of navigation, investigation checks to figure out which directions they should be going and to keep themselves from getting turned around. They'd have to get past that first puzzle to get into the prison. And every success that they made moved them up the scale towards the, hey, you made it through the maze. Every time they failed, it would move them back down that scale, and at the very bottom it was, you are hopelessly lost. And that was a really effective way to do a maze that wasn't just doing like the little, you know, draw a maze down and follow the line until you get out. It was fun for me to run because I wasn't having to keep track of so much of physically where they were. It was more of the how successful had they been in going through this maze. Of course, my players added some fun things, like they were like, oh, hey, well, we're in the warden's office. We're going to look up records of these long dead prisoners and try and figure out, they didn't know they were long dead, and try and figure out, like, who's here, if we recognize any names. That was smart. They didn't. But one of the players was like, I'm going to look up who did the worst thing, which was a serial killer. And they ended up finding his jail cell. Like, they walked by it, broke in, and stole the guy's skull. Which, okay, that might come up again. So that was definitely a, like, I just improvised a name and who the person was and what they had done. The things I love about running games is you can't anticipate that. You just gotta go with it. So my players are through the third ritual site. We're getting into a little bit of a backstory arc for one of the players. I've had another player write to me and ask for some ideas for how to involve his character's backstory that I'm gonna kind of take and play with, and I love that. I love having players get involved in it. Sorry if this has been a bit of a rambly GM diary, but I wanted to update all you folks on it, where we are, how it's going. So I'm interested to hear how you incorporate puzzles into the game, if you find ways for that to make it make sense, or if you just say, yeah, no, there's a puzzle, we're playing a game. Let's talk about it more down below. I want to thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share the video if you enjoyed it. I want to give a special thanks to all of our patrons, especially Sean, Joan, Arby, Lainey, and Bryce. If you're interested in helping support us, help us make more videos for you folks to enjoy, you can head over to patreon.com/roll4initiative and check out our perks. Alright, I'll see you next time on Roll for Initiative. Bye.
What are you doing here?
God!
There's for the blooper reel.
Whee!
Mwah.